Commissioner Bernard.
Here.
Vice Mayor Marino.
Here.
Mayor Sachs. Commissioner Weiss. Commissioner Woodward.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. And Mr. Pelowitz, would you lead us in an invocation and the pledge?
Absolutely.
Now you can stand.
Dear God, we thank you for your many blessings. Help us to serve our community and our customers with integrity, ingenuity, and responsibility. We ask that our work help others to realize better health and greater happiness. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda?
There are no additions or deletions, but I do wish to make some comments under other matters as it relates to the Environmental Protection Agency's proposed new MACT standards.
Okay, when we get there, that'll be great. Thank you. May I have an approval for the minutes of December 13th, 2023? So moved. Thank you. All in favor? Here we go. Motion carries. May I also get receive and file the Citizens Advisory Committee for February 7th, 2024. And we can do these together, can't we? Yes. And the Small Business Advisory Committee, December 5th, 2023.
So moved.
Excuse me, Commissioner. We need to adopt the agenda.
There you go. Well,
Okay.
You know what? We'll do that now.
Thank you.
May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Now we had, I think we had a motion and a second on the item number 4. So just all in favor? Aye. Thank you. And the consent agenda. Would anybody like to pull anything from the consent agenda? Do we have any cards on the consent agenda?
We do not.
Okay, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Second.
There we go. All in favor? Aye. And the consent agenda is approved. Matters by the public. Do we have any cards for matters by the public?
We do not.
Thank you very much. And let's see, item number 7, we have no workshop. Old business, postponed items, we have none. New business. Executive Director, Mr. Pelowitz.
Yes, Commissioners, welcome this morning. Before you is item 9A1. It is the Disparity Study Contract Award. Staff is requesting board direction to enter into an agreement with a firm to perform the update of the disparity study. Staff, we received 4 proposals. 1 withdrew the proposal, so we have 3 qualified proposers. Those proposals were reviewed by an evaluation committee, including staff and a CAC member. They have ranked the proposals as indicated on page 3 of 31, with Miller 3 Consulting ranked number 1, Keene Independent Research ranked number 2, and MGT of America ranked number 3. The ranking for the board's information between 1 and 2 was very close. As indicated before, the board has a right to choose whichever firm they wish to do business with. I'm comfortable with all 3 of them.
Thank you. Do I have any questions from the board members? Because I can't even, there's nothing on, there are no lights on here. No questions? Okay. Actually, I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
The last time we did this, same type of procedure, and then we authorized you to execute the agreement, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And that would be it. Thank you. All right, so your recommendation is to go with?
Well, I'm comfortable with the ranking that staff put together. Obviously, it's the board's decision. My recommendation would be to go with the staff ranking and authorize me to enter into a contract with Miller 3 Consulting, subject to legal counsel review and approval.
And before it gets to us, does it get, do any of our advisory committees, are they aware of this and the procedure?
They should be aware that we're going through this. They obviously could be involved in looking at it. The Small Business Advisory Committee could, prior to it coming to the board. The process is that obviously we work with the consultant and once the consultant produces the final report, that report is then brought back to the board for deliberation and for determination as to the continuation of the program and or any changes to the affirmative procurement initiatives that are included in the program. But if you would like us to involve the Small Business Advisory Committee at some point in this, we would absolutely do that.
I think that would actually be a good idea because they're there because of it, right?
That is correct.
Okay, so that would be a good move. I see that Commissioner Bernard has his light on.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to approve staff's recommendation and also to add to work with or to go through the Small Business Advisory Committee as mentioned by you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Item number 2, Citizens Advisory Committee appointments.
Yes, so under item 9A2, we have presented the current Citizens Advisory Committee board members. We have one open for District 4 at this point in time. Just as a correction to the memo, the District 6 representative, Ray Maurer, that would be in Commissioner Baxter's district. He lives actually now, due to the redistricting, in Commissioner Weiss's district, so he cannot continue to serve as the District 6 representative. But other than that, all of the others have indicated they wish to remain. And District 1, I think, Commissioner Marino, you have an appointment.
I do. I would like to appoint Justin Bosnoian to the Citizens Advisory Committee. He's an engineer. He holds several patents. And are you here, Justin? Nope. I thought he was going to come today. All right. So that is my appointment. Thank you very much.
So all we need is a motion, second, and approval on the balance. Oh, Commissioner Barnett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe my appointment to this committee is Rafael Amaro. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I've been informed that Mr. Amaro no longer wishes to serve, and I have a replacement I'd like to nominate.
Yes, sir.
Jose Rendon.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All righty, since that is just, those are appointments that don't need a motion. I failed to ask, I'm sorry, did we have any cards on A1?
We do not.
Okay, thank you very much. All righty, moving on to legal. Anything?
No, ma'am. Nothing, thank
Can
you.
we get a vote on the at-larges? The board needs to approve the at-larges.
Oh, I apologize.
I'll go ahead and make that motion.
And
I'll
do I have a
second.
second? We got lots of seconds. All in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. Operations, Field Services, and Utilities, item C1.
Yes, good morning, Commissioners. I'd like to take a few minutes this morning to talk to you about a new project that we're proposing for our Central County Transfer Station. Should be on
Anything
your
that helps that
Should be
area.
on your screens here momentarily. There we go. I know some of you probably have visited the station. For those of you who have not, I have an aerial of the campus here. This is one of our oldest stations. It's located at the intersection of I-95 and Lantana. This is a aerial of the campus itself. As you can see, 95 there on the right, High Ridge Road on the left. Lantana runs across the top. You can't quite see that. At the very top, you'll see it's somewhat cut off. There is the home chemical drop-off where folks can bring their used paints and batteries and things. The recycling building where we transfer recyclables. This was the original transfer station that came online in 1989. And then you'll see the scale facilities. Where it says proposed CCDC, this is the proposed location of the project I'm going to be discussing this morning. CCDC stands for Customer Convenience Drop-Off Center. Moving to the south, you'll see the new transfer station, the much larger transfer station, the multi-purpose building, which is used by the community to host any number of events. I've also marked the distances from the nearest residence there on High Ridge Road, and you can see those are well over 1,000 feet from the proposed location and from the transfer station. So as I mentioned, the original transfer station here came online in 1989. The traffic at the facility grew quickly, and in 2009, we expanded the station. We built a modern 6-bay station. Both the 1989 construction and the 2009 construction were done and permitted through the county. At that time, the parcel was part of the unincorporated area. In 2015, the entire site was annexed by the city of Lantana. So as I mentioned, this is centrally located. That's why we call it the Central County Transfer Station. It's our busiest station by far. Last year, we handled about 450,000 tons of material there. As a result of its proximity to I-95 and its central location within the county, the traffic continues to grow, and the tonnage that we receive there and process. And so the traffic continues to grow, and that has become a problem. So in recent months, we have experienced during peak times significant wait times, significant traffic lines at the facility. I'm going to show you some photos of that here in a few minutes. And the primary cause of that wait time is the mix of vehicles. So we have not only the curbside collection vehicles that come and dump, but we also have a lot of small contractors and even citizens that bring trailers and vans and pickup trucks, and all of these things have to be hand unloaded. And so sometimes this can take up to 30 or 45 minutes. And so that clogs the works up, as you can imagine, on the tip floor. So the solution to this problem, solution to the line problem, is to take that traffic out of the main line and the main tip floor area. This is an industry-wide practice that's been done. We've done it at other facilities where we build a drop-off center, an outside center where these trucks can be pulled out of the line, have a separate area to offload, and it's not affecting the wait times as much. And that's what we're proposing here. This is an example of one that we built here at the landfill. So this is located about a half a mile down the road. You can see in the center there where it says CCDC, it's just a series of stalls where cars and trucks can pull in based on what type of material that they have, offload it into what we call a roll-off box, and then we can take it up to the landfill. And then just to the west there, you'll see a ramp. This is where larger trucks can offload directly onto the ground, and then the material can be picked up and loaded directly into a trailer. This is another example at our North County Transfer Station in Jupiter. And as you can see, this is done in very close proximity to some businesses there, just to the south. And in this case, we're just handling vegetation, so it's just a ramp for vegetation. The new drop-off center would be located, as I mentioned, in that area just to the south of the recycling area, in that paved area. We chose that area for a number of reasons. It's as far away as we can get it from the neighborhood, and it's also just a really good area from an operational perspective. We're not proposing that there would be no garbage, no putrescible waste handled outside in this area. So this would just be C&D material, remodeling debris, potentially vegetation, and potentially recyclable materials, bottles, cans, paper. So no garbage. And I mentioned the reason that we chose that location. The project would be required, obviously, to go through the City of Lantana planning and zoning process, so they would have the opportunity to review it and put whatever conditions they thought relevant. And also, we would be committed to working with the community, the High Ridge and the Lake Osborne communities, and anyone else in the area. We'll do some active outreach in terms of mailers. We're also planning to have some meetings on site with the community. And then lastly, I've just added a couple of examples. These were some photos that were taken last week. So to the left is going into the tipping area, and then you can kind of see kind of in the center right next to the trailer, there's the scale facility. So you can see that those lines, again, during peak periods, they get quite long. This also gives you some of an idea of the mix of vehicles. You can see a lot of trucks and trailers. And then this is just another view of that same line. And there's at the very end of the line there, those are the types of vehicles that we're targeting for the new facility. And with that, what we're asking for is we're just asking the board to give us the approval to move forward with this project in concept. It's a project that will be budgeted as part of the 24-25 budget cycle. And then those funds obviously would come online in October, and we would begin the project at that point. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions.
I don't see any lights on.
I do.
Okay. Greg,
Thank you.
Commissioner Weiss, sorry.
That's okay.
I've known you too long.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Just a few questions, and I know you had mentioned it earlier in fact, you restated it, but you are going to be working with the town of Lantana, and the neighborhood surrounding there, and making sure that everybody's informed and on board with this.
Yes, we have a good relationship with the folks that live along High Ridge Road, in
Some
particular.
Some days.
Some days, yes. I mean, it's it's not always perfect, but we certainly intend to make a very strong effort to reach out to all of those folks.
Okay, great. All right.
I do have one quick question.
Sure.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Not a question, but since FDOT's going to be doing some road work on Lantana, do you plan on working with FDOT just to make sure that there's no conflict with the work that they're going to be doing?
Yeah, we would, if you're referring to the I-95 interchange project, the Figure 8 project, yes, we've reviewed that very closely, and I don't think that there's anything we're doing here that will impact that project. I'm not even sure that the timelines are really on a similar path, but yes, we will work with them to make sure that there's no.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Any comments? Actually, I have a comment. I think this is a great idea because anything that can speed up the process, it takes those trucks off the road that much, sitting there idling. And I think from a perspective for the neighbors, those are people moving through much more quickly and they don't have to hear or listen to or see. So I would definitely be in favor of this. Have you talked to Lantana about what, the permitting process and what the drawbacks might be?
We have not at this point, no. This is all very conceptual at this point.
Okay. Go ahead.
I will say my office has been in touch with the mayor of Lantana, so we apprised them that this was coming forward. So we put it on their radar.
Okay. Perfect.
So with that, if you don't mind, I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve
Thank
this.
Thank you. May I have a second? Wait a second. Did we have any cards? Okay, thank you. There we go. We have motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Next, new business. Who wants to go first? I see no customer information, no engineering, no planning. I do see financial management. Mr. Dumars, what would you like to share with us today?
Good morning. This morning I want to share with you the Small Business Advisory appointments. We are to approve those appointments today. The rules of the SBAC of the Solid Waste Authority require that the Authority Board appoints members of the SBAC on a yearly basis. The committee is composed of 11 members, with each board member making at least one appointment for his or her district, and the remaining 4 being appointed at large by approval of the governing board. So staff is recommending that you would move and approve these appointments.
Okay. Anyone else? Any questions? Okay. Yes.
For District 3, I have a reappointment,
Okay,
Ms. Michelle DePotter.
that'd be great. Okay. So what action do you need from us? You need a motion for the at-large seats?
Just to approve them.
Yes.
Okay. I got a motion. I have a second. All in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. All righty. Other scheduled items.
That's me. Romana, can you pull up the presentation? So over the past year, authority staff and some of the national organizations we work with have been tracking the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's effort to revise the maximum achievable control technology standards for large combustor units, which is waste energy plants. The screen's not on. Hold on. That effort, just a little background on it. Palm Beach County Renewable Energy Facilities 1 and 2, which would be impacted by this, operate in compliance with FDEP permits and air emission limits that are established by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Ref 1 was permitted originally in the mid-1980s. It's been operational since 1989. It was refurbished in 2010, which included some major improvements in the air pollution control systems. Ref 2 was permitted in 2011. It's been operational since 2015. It is the only new waste energy plant built in the United States in about 25 years. It is the cleanest waste energy plant in the world. It is, in fact, the standard that EPA proposes to use for all new sources facilities. EPA is proposing lower air emission limits for all current waste energy facilities that combust more than 250 tons per day, which would apply to both of ours. The impetus for the proposed standards is a lawsuit from various environmental organizations who are suing because EPA is required to, every 5 years, review these emissions standards, and EPA has failed to do it. So that's the primary reason. As a result of that, we've entered into a consent agreement in which EPA has committed to put in place new emissions limits by the end of 2024. Unfortunately, the industry that's regulated by this has not, in my opinion, been adequately consulted in the development of these standards. We support all environmental standards intended to protect public health where necessary. I want to make that clear. It's not the question of meeting environmental standards. It's a question of where and how they're established and whether they're achievable or not. A total of 57 existing facilities nationwide will be impacted by these. The Clean Air Act, as I said, requires U.S. EPA to evaluate these standards every 5 years, and the last update was in 2006. So, timeline. U.S. EPA published the proposed standards on January 25th. There is a 60-day comment period that ends on March 25th. It's not a long time to comment on something EPA has been working on for years, particularly when you're looking at impacts on highly engineered systems and trying to evaluate what impact that's going to have on, for example, R2 facilities. These regulations could go into effect as soon as December 2024. Owners of facilities have until December 2029 to retrofit the facilities to meet the new air emissions limits. At issue is Renewable Energy Facility number 1. The contract expires in 2029. If you remember from when we did the future facilities discussion, we indicated that the plan was to extend that contract for 5 years under the existing permit, while at the same time constructing its replacement with a new modern mass burn waste energy plant on the site. The real issue for us at this point as it relates to Ref 1 is how much money are we willing to put into Ref 1 in order to retrofit the air pollution control systems to meet these new requirements if the intention is that facility would only operate 5 years beyond 2029. So that's a serious question. Ref 2, we don't have as many significant issues with Ref 2 because it is the modern standard. There will be impacts there, but those I believe are manageable. So what exactly are they proposing? They're proposing reduced air emission limits for all existing units. Importantly, they're also proposing the elimination of startup shutdown and malfunction data exclusions. So this is problematic because emissions in these plants can fluctuate significantly during startup shutdown and malfunction periods. And that's been acknowledged in the current regulations for decades. The problem with this is that it's sometimes, particularly with carbon monoxide, when you're first introducing waste into the boiler, you can get some spikes. And the combination of lowering the limits and eliminating the exclusion of these periods can result in exceedances in the permit limits when we currently don't have them. So, typically you can say there's an average emissions level, but there are fluctuations around it. And so you're going to get peaks at times when you have startup shutdown and malfunction. Right now, those in many cases fall below. When you average them into the period, you still fall below the statutory limit or the regulatory limit. When you lower that standard, that emissions limit, you now have times where you're currently not in violation, where you potentially could be in violation. And that's particularly problematic with carbon monoxide, because carbon monoxide is controlled through combustion practices. There is no device that protects, that absorbs carbon monoxide. So it really is difficult. There's no retrofit you can do to improve the carbon monoxide emissions during startup shutdown and malfunction. So you're operating under a circumstance where there is now a higher expectation that you could potentially have a violation. And that's a problem because we try to keep those at zero. And we're not used to being in violation of environmental controls, and we don't want to be. The second issue is with the continuous emissions monitoring systems. So most of the pollutants are measured on a continuous basis with monitors that constantly sample the flue gas to determine the level of those emissions. Those monitors, EPA is assuming that they can be operational 100% of the time. That's not the case. They do go down from time to time. They do malfunction. You work to get them back up again. As with startup shutdown and malfunction, within reason, these outage periods are allowable. If they move forward with making each one of these outages a violation, I can guarantee you that these facilities will be in violation multiple times a year. And that is problematic for me as a responsible official for these facilities, but it's for everyone because we cannot operate a plant that's consistently having violations. And so the issue here is the only solution to this is to basically install redundant SEMs throughout both facilities, so that in the event one of these monitors goes down, there's a backup that's continuously running behind it. That poses, obviously, there's a cost associated with that. Those all have to be maintained. All that data has to be collected. You've probably got control systems that have to be modified to be able to handle the switch from the primary unit to a secondary unit. There's a lot in this that hasn't really been thought through by EPA. So what are the impacts to us? So first, the first impact is that we would likely have to retrofit REF 1 with advanced selective non-catalytic reduction technology, cost $10 to $15 million. We have selective non-catalytic reduction technology on the plant, but to get it to the level that they need it to get to, we would probably have to retrofit with this other technology. You should know that it's installed on very few plants. One of the technologies, it's called low NOx, is a Covanta proprietary technology. They're our operator, but it is proprietary. It is not readily sourced from anybody else, so there certainly wouldn't be any competition there. But there's a cost there. We would also have to upgrade the fabric filters and cages in the bag houses. So the bag houses basically have these very large, what you would consider to be vacuum cleaner bags. The concept there is the flue gas is pulled through through the bag house, and the particulate basically is caught up on the outside of those bags, and then the air comes through. They're proposing upgrading the bags, which means you have to upgrade the cages that the bags attach to, and those bags would likely have for the lack of a better word, a much smaller holes in them, for example, to capture smaller particulate and capture more of it. So there's a cost associated with that. And also for the control of acid gases like SO2 and HCl, increased lime usage in the spray driver absorbers. That has an operating cost impact. And as I talked about, the continuous emissions monitoring systems. Similarly, REF2. REF2's emissions are very low, but as I said, you need to operate within a safety margin so that you don't have exceedances. So similar upgrades likely would be required at REF2 in the fabric filters cages for the bag houses. Similarly, increased carbon injection and lime usage to stay under those new limits, and the redundant SEMS systems as well. Landfill capacity impacts. If we were to shut down REF 1 in 2029 and not build REF 3, which is what we're calling it, our landfill life would be depleted from 2054 to 2044. So we would take 10 years off of our landfill life, which would mean that we have to make a decision about the next landfill a lot sooner. It could potentially involve trucking waste to distant landfills throughout the state rather than taking responsibility for solid waste here. So that's a real impact on us and on our future planning. And obviously another alternative would be to build another landfill in the county. But the reality is as we've seen before, there's very little stomach for another landfill in Palm Beach County. Certainly not in the Everglades agricultural area, which is the only place it could possibly go. So the reality is if we're not landfilling and some magical technology doesn't develop between now and then, we're going to have to be loading waste into trucks and shipping it either to Okeechobee County or up to St. Cloud or somewhere else in the state, or even as Miami-Dade is considering rail haul to Georgia. It's not a good situation. Landfilling in Florida is not the best of ideas. The high water table, the abundance of wetlands, is simply not, it's not optimal. So just to go through a little bit of the emissions that we're talking about, in the, I guess it's the fourth column over, are the new proposed emissions limits. You're looking at, for example, NOx, 110 parts per million. We currently operate at REF 2 well below that at 32.6, but at REF 1 we're higher. We're at 142, so that's why the ASNCR technology would have to be pursued. Looking at some of the others, as I talked about carbon monoxide, yes, we are well below the current limit in both cases, but not all the time. And so if you take out the startup shutdown and malfunction periods, those averages at the peak, could exceed that permit limit that's in there, the new permit limit that EPA is talking about. So that's something that needs to be considered. And again, I'm not going to go through all of them. We're generally pretty good in all of these, even at REF 1 with regard to SO2. We're currently operating at roughly 22. The new standard would be 20. It's a question consistently below that 20, meaning operating in the 17, 18 range consistently, so you know you're going to stay below it. So that's where the increased use of lime would be required. And I think we'll just flip on a little bit here. I think everybody gets the idea, and move on to the next one too. So let's talk about the new regulations and environmental justice, which is one of the reasons being cited by the environmental community as it relates to waste energy. U.S. EPA assumes that waste energy facilities are disproportionately located in low-income communities and communities of color. The reality is waste energy facilities are constructed to service the solid waste disposal needs of those local communities. Those waste energy facilities are generally built in urban areas because you can't really site a landfill in an urban area. So you're siting them where the waste is generated. U.S. EPA, in making its analysis, likes to compare the area right around the waste energy facility to the demographics within 50 miles of the facility and to the national average, which again is misleading because no one is siting a waste energy in the middle of Nebraska. Waste energy facilities are sited generally in urban areas, and they service the communities that they're around. And by the way, there is absolutely zero scientific evidence supporting demonstrating any health risks associated with these waste energy plants. For example, there are more than 500 waste energy plants in Europe. There are 900 in China. They're building them all over the world. This concept that this opposition to waste energy at the level it is in the United States is unique in the industrialized world, but it is the reason why there's only been one new plant built in the neighborhood of 25 years. I'd also like to point out also that the alternative to waste energy right now is landfilling, and landfills have their own environmental impacts, and they're significant. From landfills, do that because they eliminate the methane generated by landfills. They recover tens of thousands of tons of metals from the waste stream that would otherwise be entombed in landfills. And as a consequence, you don't have to produce those from virgin ores, which have to be mined and refined and shipped all over the planet. They also produce clean, renewable energy from solid waste, displacing fossil fuels. So the consensus among the UN and the EU and even the EPA is that waste energy is dramatically superior to landfilling in all material respects. But nevertheless, the regulations that are being put in place right now threaten the closure of a number of these waste energy facilities nationwide, largely due to the fact that, it's an aging fleet. As with our Ref 1, you have to ask questions. Are you willing to put that kind of money in a facility that has a finite, useful remaining life? It's not a question of what they're proposing for new sources is exactly what we have in Ref 2. And that obviously is doable, and we've demonstrated it's doable. It's expensive, but it can be done. But the issue really for us is what's the impact on Ref 1 and how it affects our future planning. Just to get into a little bit of the demographics of race that EPA has brought up, it's important to note that when these facilities were built was a long time ago, and demographics were different at the time than they are now. We've seen significant demographic change in the area around this plant since the plant was originally designed in the 1980s. And as you see, that the minority population in and around this plant in 2020 is significantly different than it was back in 1980 or 1990 or 2000. So we've seen an increase in minority populations in and around this facility, but it's also important to note, moving on to the next slide, that same demographic trend has existed countywide. And so, the argument that this facility is sited in a community in minority communities or highly minority communities, that wasn't the case when it was sited. And even today, the demographics, though different in the county as a whole, lower minority, higher Caucasian throughout the rest of the county, the trend is pretty much identical in terms of a downward trend. So our concerns. So first and foremost, EPA didn't follow the process required by the Clean Air Act for amendments to the air emission limits. Specifically, they did not perform the residual risk analysis that the Clean Air Act calls for. And what that means is they haven't demonstrated scientifically that there's a need to lower the emissions to the levels that they've established that they propose herein. So absent that need, again, if they can define that there's an absolute need for it, then that's perfectly fine. But absent a demonstration of that need, we could be spending money unnecessarily or shutting plants unnecessarily to achieve no additional benefit. EPA assumes that these new air emission limits can be met by making minor modifications, and that's not the case. They've looked at each component of the air pollution control system separately and not considered what the impact throughout the entire engineered system is. They've assumed that you could, for example, add more lime in your SDA and that it has no impact on the baghouse or on your SCR unit downstream, and that's simply not the case. They've assumed that you can just upgrade your bags in your bag houses and even the cages, and that's enough. Well, that's not necessarily the case, because you may have to create more chambers in the bag house. It may change your conveyors. There are a lot of other things that are impacted. They've assumed, so at the back end of the plant, there's this thing called the induced draft fan. It's an ID fan, they call it. It pulls flue gas through the plant. They've assumed that by changing these bags, you're not going to impact that ID fan, that you won't have to replace it. Well, that may be the case in just changing the bags, but when you start adding more carbon, more lime, and the moisture associated with the lime slurry, and you change the temperature of the flue gas, leaving the SDA unit, you potentially impact all of the air pollution control systems downline. And you may have to modify all of those as well. And none of that is costed, and none of that is considered in what they've done due to the piecemeal approach they've taken to it. It will likely require the new regular will likely result in existing facilities shutting down. My only concern right now is Ref 1. What happens nationwide, obviously there's a concern, but our responsibility is Palm Beach County. So these technologies haven't been fully evaluated, and with the 60-day comment period, we don't have a lot of time to evaluate them and provide meaningful comments. There have been 2 requests sent to EPA to extend the comment period by 30 to 60 days. EPA has rejected both requests. The elimination of the startup shutdown and the monitor downtime, I can tell you right now, absent some very significant changes, will result in violations, and some of them will be unavoidable. And that is not something that I am comfortable with, or that anyone should be comfortable with. Operating conditions that today are acceptable and tomorrow result in violations, potentially multiple violations. That's not the way we operate. If waste energy, if our Ref 1 is shut down early or not rebuilt, then we have increased reliance on landfilling. You're going to see lower recycling rates. You're going to see the potential of more use of these large mega landfills in rural and suburban areas. You're going to see increased greenhouse gas generation because, as I said, waste energy facilities are net greenhouse gas reducers. You're going to see increased dependence on fossil fuels. These facilities produce a significant amount of electricity and put it on the grid. They recover the heat energy in the waste that we generate. And the deadline for comment doesn't allow sufficient time for waste energy owners like ourselves to actually evaluate the impact of these changes on our facilities so we can provide meaningful input. What are we doing? We are prepared to request a 60-day time extension from EPA. We're going to send them a letter so that we have time to fully evaluate the impacts of these new air emission limits on our facilities. They may turn it down like they have the others, but perhaps if they get enough requests, that will change their mind. We have had discussions with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection to seek their approval to do some tests to evaluate the effectiveness of some of the operational modifications that EPA is considering, specifically increasing the usage of the reagents and chemicals that are part of our air pollution control system to see if we can bring those emissions down simply by adding more lime, adding more carbon, things like that. We've met with the operator, Covana, to develop test protocols for these operational modifications. We're planning basically a 10-day test period during which time we're going to gather data and try and see how we can impact, what the impact is on the plant, whether it is actually feasible to increase your lime usage and bring down those emissions without causing any issues downstream, although it's hard to tell only within 10 days whether that will or not. We're collaborating with the Florida Waste Energy Coalition to join the industry in voicing our concerns to EPA. We're also working with the Waste Energy Association and others who may pursue litigation against US EPA over this, the specific complaint being the failure to perform the residual risk assessment that's required. And we are considering sending letters to members of Congress requesting their assistance in this matter and dealing with EPA. So that's what I have on the update. I felt it important to bring that to your attention because it potentially affects our future solid waste management plan. It also potentially could result in tens of millions of dollars. We would either have to take from reserves or bond in order to get this done. I also don't like to get engaged in anything legislatively or politically without board input. So with that, that's my update.
It's a lot of information.
Sorry about that.
No, it's. I know we've talked about this before, and it's important for us to know what the ramifications are. Do I have any questions of Mr. Pelowitz? Comments? Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Couple things. Obviously share your concerns. I would suggest, in regards to, at the very least, getting the 60-day extension so you can realistically look at what's being proposed and look at what we have going on. So reaching out to members of Congress, our congressional delegation, to hopefully assist in gaining that extension to start with. And let's see where that takes us.
Well, I also was curious if we sued also as a group, does that stay the procedure at this point in time?
It's unknown. Typically, in order to, I'm not a lawyer, sometimes I pretend to be one. In order to obtain an injunction, you have to demonstrate likelihood of success on the merits. And so obviously a court would have to determine whether that existed to the level that they would issue an injunction to stay the implementation of these. I know, obviously, if we were to join a suit, I'd want the board's authorization to do that and an appropriation of funds. But right now, there are agencies that we are affiliated with, the WTEA, for example, who have initiated legal action. So there are folks that are doing it. I wouldn't envision the Solid Waste Authority on its own engaging in litigation on this matter. I think it's better through the industry.
Howard, do you want to pipe in?
I'm sorry, I'm filling in for Mike, so I don't have any background on this particular matter, and therefore haven't looked into it in any way, so I can't comment directly on this. What Dan did say is accurate regarding injunction. I do also agree with him that I think it would be very expensive for us to pursue this on our own, so I think his recommendation that we go with the industry and involve ourselves with that would make the most sense.
I can't imagine that the industry is going to sit back and take this, so I'm sure there's going to be a group of people doing this. And I think Commissioner Woodward?
Yes, thank you. Chair, on the first slide, you had that there's 57 existing facilities nationwide that will be impacted. Are they all part of the WTEA, the association, or?
I'm not sure, but I don't know. Ramona, do you have the answer to that?
Not all of them, but majority of the big plants, they're a part of the coalition.
Okay, so the 57 facilities, they're nationwide. Are we able to reach out to them to also kind of get them on board with this, even if they're not part of the association, just to kind of build numbers? I think the more that are impacted, that we speak with a unified voice, this would be better.
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Directions? So what do you feel your directions are from this board, and what do you need from us?
Well, right now I believe the direction is obviously the suggestion is to contact the congressional delegation, provide them with a letter to bring them on board, to work with the WTEA and our peers in the industry, to get our voices out there, to request an extension in the comment period, and to move forward with investigating the impacts on the authority's plants in the near term in an effort to provide meaningful input.
Just a quick question. Violation, we would be in violation. What exactly are the violation penalties?
Well, we don't get them very often, but Mary Beth, you have any input on that?
I'm going to say it depends. It depends on the pollutant, but they can range in how many days. So it can be a couple of thousand to tens of thousands.
You mean dollars?
Dollars.
So the penalty is money. I guess that's my question.
That, and Dan being the responsible official, they take this very seriously. And sometimes if it's willingly and knowingly, there could be jail time potentially.
Oh. I was going
I
to
don't
say,
like that part.
sometimes it's the cost of doing business, but because when you look at the numbers that you supplied us on
And I try to keep
4.
Dan out of jail. So
Yeah, I keep Dan out of jail. Page 5. I mean, worst case scenarios, we're looking at $66 million, and we're looking at it as a one-time expenditure, and then we're looking at $2.5 million annually for this. So if it was just I would never want to do this, but sometimes the cost of doing business is paying the fine. But jail time is not part of the cost of doing business.
No, and that's why I mentioned the issue related to the startup shutdown malfunction and the monitors. Some of those will be arguably unavoidable, and I can't knowingly operate the plants in violation of the Clean Air Act. That's not good. So you put the owners and operators of these facilities in a very tough position when you impose requirements that are effectively unachievable in the real world. And so at the very least, EPA needs to take a look at their assumptions in that area and revisit them or be compelled to. Because just from my perspective, I don't know that it's feasible to operate under the assumption that these monitors that are installed in harsh environments, especially in Florida, where you've got ambient temperatures that are roughly in the 90s, and you get inside the plant and you're over 100 degrees in some areas of that plant, in the flue gas, the expectation that these sensitive devices are going to operate 100% of the time without fail is just not realistic. It's just not. And the other side of that is just because the monitor is down doesn't mean your emissions are high. I mean, the monitor can be down and the plant can be operating exceptionally well. It's just the monitor's down. And they're looking for a standard with these continuous emissions monitors that are in the plant that monitor most of the pollutants continuously, but some others are regulated based on a stack test that's done once a year. And so with that regard, those things that are covered by stack tests, you have no idea what they are generally all year long from a regulatory standpoint. But so they're okay with one-time stack emissions, stack tests for some pollutants, but the others where you do have continuous emissions monitoring, they're looking for 100% coverage. So I don't think that's realistic either. But
Are there any other questions? Commissioner Woodward.
Thank you. One further question. You mentioned, having the monitor be down. As part of the communication with them, are you able to give suggestions for what is realistic? Like if it's down for X number of time, that this is, like standard operating, this happens? Is there a way, as we're communicating with them, to kind of let them know? It seems like they may not be having a full understanding of how this operates.
yes, there is a way to do that. In fact, currently there's a percentage limit of percentage of downtime that's the regulatory requirement. They're moving from the allowable percentage of downtime to something along the lines of 0. So obviously, like I said, we have no opposition to effective air pollution controls and reasonable limits on emissions. Absolutely. I mean, we built REF 2 to the highest possible standard, so we've demonstrated that already. This isn't about trying to operate suboptimally in any way. It's just about making sure that what they're proposing is achievable with the current plants as they exist, and that it's reasonable. Otherwise, this looks a lot like just an effort to shut down waste energy in the United States, and that would be, well, that's simply a major step backwards, and it's not what the rest of the world is doing. So that's my 2 cents on that. Thanks.
Well, I see no other comments, so thank you for the information, and we're here to support whatever we can do.
Thank you.
All righty. Other scheduled matters? I do not. Oh, wait a second. Let me go back. That's right. That was you. Comments by the General Counsel?
None again, other than to wish everyone a happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any of staff like to comment? Comments by our board members? Besides Happy Valentine's Day. And thank you for the chocolates. Well, there's no lights here. Thank you. Commissioner Weiss.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First off, I want to thank staff again. You all have been doing a wonderful job, and when things have come up, you continue to look for solutions quickly and put them in place. So very much appreciate that. So please send my regards to the rest of the staff as well. I'd like to ask that we authorize Solid Waste Authority staff to work with county staff regarding the Pike Road site that we were going to be using for equestrian waste, to look at that for use temporarily for truck parking. I think for a short term that could provide, regardless of what happens, I know we've been talking about it at the county, but we also know nationwide there's a need for additional truck parking in this country. So temporarily, while we look for longer term solutions, while we were up in Washington this past week, met with our congressional delegations, most of the members of our delegation expressed the need and looking for assistance from the federal government on this. We're also working with FDOT, trying to work for siting additional truck parking. But in this case, we've got that property that is now sitting vacant, and we like to see that we could make that available. I've talked to Mr. Pelowitz. There's no objection from SWA staff on this, so I'd like to see if we can pursue this and maybe find some additional parking.
I think that's a fabulous idea. I know that the topic of trucks is I'm not wading into it at this moment, but I think one of the things that we can do as a board is try to find solutions, and this is a great way to do that. Also, the conversation with FDOT is great. I've had several with Steve Braun, and there are actually, they have located some sites that they're trying to work with in our neck of the woods, and if everyone paid any attention, they might have seen that FDOT got $180 million for the I-4 corridor to do truck parking. So there's money out there to be had, and we just need to make sure that we keep on it with our legislative delegation to get some money. And with that, do we have any other comments? And just to confirm, our next meeting will be April 10th, 2024, right here, 9:30. We are adjourned. Thank you so much. That's a great solution. Temporary at least, but great.